this is like, I don't want to see, I don't want to hear. It's going to go away. No, it's not going to go away. And we're behind already in really understanding what it was that really created the symptom.
I don't know what is in the water in Ottawa right now, but the hypocrisy this week has been absolutely hilarious and so enjoyable to point out. I cannot wait to get into some of the details of what people are going off about right now. We're going to be talking Jamil, Javanni, Tate, Mcrae, Chrystia Freeland, Mark Carney. Oh, goodness, it's a good one. I'm Jasmine Lane. Like, share, subscribe, and comment your thoughts down below. Follow us on other social media platforms as well. I, for one, was not expecting CTV News to roast the Liberal government this hard, but I'm here for it. I actually quite enjoy watching them squirm, trying to lie their way out of these knots they've twisted themselves into. And a very, very left-leaning publication, worse than the CBC for sure, has said something about Pierre Poilievre that I guess means hell has frozen over.
If I could ask you about Jamil, Javanni, the Conservative MP who headed to the United States, he said that he was going to meet, and I don't have confirmation, this is just through his social media channels, that he was going to meet with GM, and I just wondered if he had asked for a briefing or if you had offered one.
No, I think it's because I actually called him on it, saying that as MP in charge of Oshawa constituents that are working at GM, that are losing their job, why is he just embracing the Trump administration that is putting tariffs on them and having them, lose their job?
You are a transformative president.
And why is he basically not denouncing the U.S. auto tariffs?
And the history of Canada and the U.S. is we're stronger when we work together, and there's many opportunities to work together.
And that's just a question that across Oshawa people are asking.
And the G7 is nothing without U.S. leadership, and your personal leadership.
He says he can be of help to the government by going there. Do you think that's possible?
I'm not in his heart nor in his mind. I'm just looking at what he says and what are the facts. And until I actually said on television that he was not talking and denouncing the GM layoffs, he didn't talk about it. And now he's talking about it. So I think, basically it talks for itself.
As Josh from the Elevate podcast wrote, we've tried your strategy of denouncing tariffs and we haven't seen improvement. Why would you want Jamil, Javanni to do the exact same thing you've been doing? Isn't it time for a new perspective? Why hate on him for that? And, the most disappointing and unsurprising part of this exchange was truly just the pettiness dressed up as governance. So to be asked, hey, did you brief him on this? Like a calm, responsible, confident government would respond by saying, yep, we briefed him and, we welcome any effort whatsoever that helps Canadian workers. An insecure one, keep score, for one, gross. I hated people like this growing up. And also police's tone and treats initiative as some sort of insubordination. Like, it's just so outrageous that she'd be like, well, no, he didn't come here and I didn't brief him because I actually called him out on the fact that he did not denounce tariffs. Oh my goodness. And then the most immature part is when she says he didn't talk about it until I scolded him on television. The pride. Oh, she felt so proud of herself for that one. Melanie Joly, grow up. This is not high school politics. What is this? In what world does denouncing tariffs stop job losses from happening? Help our economy? It doesn't. It doesn't. That is all your government has been doing for the last year, is denouncing tariffs. Where are we? Oh, right. Absolutely nowhere. But then the worst part too, there's so many worst parts, is that the hypocrisy, the contradictions. Like, this Liberal government so consistently is like, oh, it's the Conservatives' fault. Everything is the Conservatives' fault. The party that hasn't been in power for 10 plus years, the party that has only been in power for 9 out of the last 33 years. Oh, it's all their fault. Sure it is. It's their fault because they don't cooperate. Oh yeah, they're blocking things. Yeah, they're stalling things, those guys over there. And then you have a conservative who has better connections in Washington than the government does, obviously, who goes there and tries to utilize those after making a public announcement saying, I would like to help on CBC News, and the government ignores him. Of course they do, because they don't actually want cooperation. It's all about optics, not outcomes.
It's certainly a lot more useful and helpful than Jamil Javanni going down to, quote unquote, negotiate on behalf of who knows who, with who knows what mandate. But he must have, I presume he went down with the leader's authorization. And I think what was going on there was to focus on the Canada-U.S. trade deal as being, first of all, the be-all and the end-all, rather than something that we have to be able to take or leave. And secondly, to blame the government for the absence of one so far. If only Jamil Javanni and people like him were negotiating it, we'd already have it, is the implicit message. So there's a supposedly bipartisan helpful move that is neither helpful nor particularly bipartisan.
Well, there's a big straw man that they have built that's definitely exaggerated. They pretend that Jamil Javanni is over there negotiating a full trade deal. He's not. He's there to replace official channels. He's not. He has admitted that. And that he will single-handedly solve Canada-U.S. trade. He never once said any of that. What they did do is invent a caricature so that they could knock him down based on a false premise, a false framing that he's not even there to do. What a very classic move for pundits to make when the real action makes them feel really uncomfortable. Let's also not forget that for anybody to say, oh, well, it's not particularly bipartisan, that doesn't matter. Like, that actually doesn't matter. Because to criticize him for being not particularly bipartisan is ridiculous. That doesn't mean complete obedience. When bipartisan cooperation means that the government expects you to not show initiative, to be silent, to wait your turn, and to not embarrass the government, that's on them for not having results on what they ran for. It has been a year of no results and continued denouncements. Where has that gotten us? Absolutely nowhere. And here's an update from Jamil Javanni.
I am really hoping that I can bring my insights and what I've learned here back to Ottawa, share them with Prime Minister Mark Carney and Minister Dominic LeBlanc. And this can be the beginning of a truly non-partisan approach to working with the United States. This is not a partisan issue. It's not about liberals or conservatives. This is about Canadian workers and Canadian businesses and how we can make sure our economy is growing and our economy is thriving.
And the real reason why people, I think at least, are so uncomfortable by Jamil Javanni's trip is that he didn't play the posturing game. I know Jamil. I have met him. I have interviewed him. I have chatted with him. He is not that kind of guy. He is a very rare breed of somebody involved in politics who comes at it from a very pure place. And he didn't play that. He played the leverage game, and he exposed how hollow what the liberals are doing actually is. Because if you actually care about jobs, income, stability, trade, all of those things, you would never in a million years reject real leverage because it doesn't look tough enough, because somebody didn't denounce something. You would use it and you would exploit the hell out of it and push it as far as you possibly could to best represent the people that you are fighting for.
I see no evidence, unless you do, that China is a less disruptive global power. And your government has made decisions now to open a market that you have, talked about how important it is to the Canadian economy, open up a market to Chinese investments in the auto sector, to open up more Chinese investment in oil and gas, for example, another critical asset for Canada. Is that a mistake given your own assessment of China just a few short years ago?
Well, I think things have changed. When you make assessments, it's based also on the context in which you're making them. And the U.S. has decided to change its course when it comes to trade. And Canadian auto workers are the first victims of that. And so, of course, we'll continue to seek a good agreement with the U.S. and with Mexico. We will obviously put a lot of time and efforts in the renewal and revision of the CUSMA agreement. But at the same time, the negotiations that we've had with China have been more predictable and much more stable than the experience we've had with the U.S. And that's a statement I made a month ago, and I stand by my statement, because we're not the only ones experiencing that. Ask the question to Europeans, ask the questions to the Japanese, ask the question to the Koreans. They're experiencing the same reality as we are.
Don't you think, though, with respect, Minister, that that's by design by China, that they see the world as it is right now and want to seize on the moment for less than altruistic purposes?
Look at her shaking her head there. Nope, there's no way that China, who is an adversary, China would never do that to us. No, we're way smarter than China. They're totally not taking advantage of this. They totally didn't interfere in the last 3 elections to try to benefit the Liberals. They totally don't have any influence whatsoever in our politics, and they're taking advantage of how weak we are. No, 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 they would never do that. Girl, get real here.
By the way, on the Javanni thing, whether Pierre Poilievre authorized it or not, the last thing we need are for opposition members to suddenly freelance and say we're going to renegotiate the relationship and come home to say Donald Trump told me he likes us.
Yeah. He loves us.
Give me a break.
He loves us.
The problem is that conservative strategists, and I agree with them on this, totally believe that if they're going to fight this on the battlefield of Trump, Canada-U.S. relations, etc., they can't win against Mcrae with Pierre Poilievre. Yeah. And that is the biggest problem.
This is come on. It's just such a lie. It is such a lie. And all of this, the hypocrisy, the contradictions here, it just exposes Elbows Up for exactly what it is. It is a complete fallacy. It is a complete lie and manipulation. PSYOP. It is a complete psychological operation to sell your public this notion that real leadership means you're with us or you're against us. We're going to talk tough. We're going to denounce loudly. And we're going to refuse to engage unless every single box of the ideological purity test is checked. But let's take some examples of this, right? Let's apply Elbows Up consistently. And let's see where it actually collapses, because the rules seem to disappear depending on who it is that is doing the engaging. Let's take an example here of our prime minister announcing his run in a nice little tease on American television. His first time ever being on the Jon Stewart show. First time in history to do this.
A wild hypothetical. Let's say the candidate wasn't part of the government. Let's say the candidate did have a lot of economic experience. Let's say the candidate did deal with crises. Let's say the candidate had a plan to deal with the challenges in the here and now.
Sneaky, you're running as an outsider.
I am an outsider.
That seems a little weird, isn't it? Why would you do that in America? I thought it was Elbows Up for Canada. Yet you're taking advantage of America's opportunities and audience, and the fame and notoriety being on such a show could bring you. Then we have, Tate Mcrae as an example. She's a young Canadian artist, and she was in the Olympic ad for the U.S., and people say that it's betrayal, it's treasonous. In fact, here's an article from Toronto Life, which, by the way, if I'm not mistaken, Mark Carney has been on a podcast with these guys a few times, titled, Canadian Tate Mcrae's Team USA Olympics ad is treason. It's been betrayal after betrayal. Here's an excerpt. You know loyalty, where a country puts its heart in your hands and you don't respond by stomping all over it.
As a European, as a
European, I am a European, actually.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, I'm an Irish citizen. Yeah, so there you go.
Welcome.
Speaking as a European.
It's a pretty basic concept, but apparently not one well known by Tate Mcrae, who recently outed herself as a Team USA spokesperson. And she is literally grabs megaphone from Canada. Well, obviously, if that's applied consistently, you would expect that Mike Myers would have the same type of outrage. But no, actually, you go on to nowtoronto.com, where they have a headline from a week ago saying Mike Myers honors Canadian military on Saturday Night Live. With a subtle tap to his home country's flag, the Canadian comedian displayed his patriotism at the end of the sketch comedy show. In fact, Toronto Life, that same outlet that just posted about Tate Mcrae there, says 2 Canadian comedy legends are reuniting at Second City next week with a photo of Mike Myers cheerleading on his amazing career. Also, a CBC article from July 1st, 2025. He made the decision on impulse, but it sparked a movement. Mike Myers on Elbows Up. CTV from March 24th, 2025. Mike Myers joins Mark Carney in liberal ads supporting the Elbows Up movement. Actually, on that CBC News article, it writes, in conversation with The National, the actor and comedian tells CBC's Paul Hunter what pushed him to that moment, revealing a deep gratitude for what Canada has given him. We're talking about this Mike Myers, right? This gratitude?
I love Washington, D.C. I mean, oh my God.
Fascinating.
It's a great
I'm an American citizen now, gratefully so. I gave him a speech about what a great country this is and what a privilege it is to be in this country. Some pretty strong ideals that my British parents, growing up in Canada, and my now American citizenship stand for. I don't take it lightly at all. It's a very, very important thing to me.
Man, it is so funny how the same people who frequently call myself and my colleagues grifters support that guy. Huh. Crazy. And we also have Chrystia Freeland today, proudly promoting her appearance on Real Time with Bill Maher. No one is saying, why aren't they elbows up? Nobody is saying, what are they doing courting Americans? Why aren't they denouncing harder? Probably because either you publicly state that you're with us or you're our greatest enemy. That sounds really authoritative, doesn't it? That sounds a lot like some cult behavior, perhaps.
Good luck, Team Canada. You've earned this moment. After long days and late nights, through discipline, sacrifice, and relentless effort, you're ready to compete at the highest level. And our country is right behind you. In a more divided and uncertain world, your success will unite Canadians from coast to coast to coast and remind us that we are part of something bigger.
Now let's compare that to Tate Mcrae, shall we? Because in this message, engagement with the world is not treated as treasonous or betrayal. It's actually celebrated. Competing internationally is no weakness at all. It's actually a huge strength. And representing Canada on the world stage is not embracing foreign influence. It is how national pride is built. There's also a huge elephant in the room here, which is what kind of a country are you building? When success is punished, ambition is shamed, and citizens are accused of treason for accepting job opportunities that their own country failed to provide. If your country cannot create opportunity for your best and brightest, but then condemns those same citizens for accepting it elsewhere, none of that is patriotic. That's actually insecurity. And sprinkled with a lot of authoritative and totalitarian regimes and how they start. Don't believe me? Read some history. So the contradiction when Canadian athletes compete globally, it's unifying. When Canadian artists succeed globally, it's suspicious. When liberal leaders go on American platforms, it's strategic. When conservative MPs talk to Americans, it's betrayal. Very different rules, hey? And Mark Carney perfectly nails it at the end when he says your success will unite Canadians. That's exactly true. Success does indeed unite people. Outcomes also unite people, as do results. All of those things unite people. Not loyalty rituals, not performative outrage, not selective outrage, not denunciations. And when do we get to the point where we actually stop and ask ourselves, what are we becoming? What are we allowing them to do to us?
And we will take no lectures, especially from those who only spontaneously rediscovered their patriotism and love for Canada just 15 months ago, right? Who spent the last 10 years deriding this country, tearing down statues, erasing our history, stigmatizing the flying of our national flag. These are the same people, remember, who wanted to cancel Canada Day, who took Terry Fox and Vimy Ridge out of our passport, and now they are claiming to be the true defenders of Canadian sovereignty and identity? I don't think so.
All of these contradictions are not accidental. Not a single one of them is. It is the product of a country that has replaced confidence with control. and leadership with narrative enforcement, where elbows up posturing feels safer than actual engagement and results, and fear is so much easier to sell. I mean, for crying out loud, in his "Good job, good luck, Team Canada" speech, Mark Carney had to use dangerous divided world. None of that is normal. And I'm sorry if I sound conspiratorial, but seriously, if you look at the language, you look at the actions, you look at the contradictions, the massive hypocrisy that is so consistent, the blame game, the finger pointing, it points to one thing. We are being conditioned. That's exactly what it is. And there's many of us who see right through that. And we know that results still matter, that actions mean so much more than words. And to really highlight how hollow, how meaningless, and how irrelevant our political discourse has become and what actually matters to a good chunk of people, it's an article like this, shockingly enough, posted on the Star. And it says, "I can't believe this still needs to be said about Poilievre and Trump," but apparently it does. And what was really stunning about this article, yes, I subscribe to the Toronto Star so you don't have to, is that the columnist not only defends Pierre Poilievre, but more importantly admits, perhaps unintentionally, that the comparison of Poilievre to Trump doesn't even need to be true in order to be effective. And, you know, he walks through a pretty fair and honest assessment. Obviously, I'd have some different takes on some issues, especially when it comes to strategy and things like that. But he correctly highlights how Pierre Poilievre has not in the slightest moved even further right than past conservative leaders, and actually that his ideology would not have been out of place with past conservative leaders, that he has a very strong support, all of that stuff. There's a lot of things that he hasn't abandoned. There's a lot of stuff that are very normal for conservatives to position themselves on, and that he's also even resisted in some cases to move further right than some of those in the base would maybe want him to be. But in other words, the way that I kind of summarize this is that the substance is not the problem. And the article is really explicit about that. The problem is tone. The problem is vibes. And so they say that, you know, a punchier style, a confrontational posture, a social media strategy that at times can appear a little bit more direct and blunt and effective, in my opinion, than what Canadians are comfortable with. And that alone is enough to sink Pierre Poilievre. And I really do think that this article in particular connects everything we've talked about today so perfectly. Jamil Javanni did not do anything substantively wrong, but his engagement felt wrong to the narrative. So it was framed as some sort of a betrayal. Tate Mcrae didn't violate anything at all, but her success felt uncomfortable. So it was framed as treasonous. Poilievre is not Trump, but the feeling of Trump, conditioned by largely our media, is enough to keep the label alive. And so even when a comparison is false, even when it's totally unfounded, when it's like so unhinged and irrational, it still works. And that's not an observation about Pierre Poilievre. That is an observation about the Canadian public. And it really is sad to witness how big of an impact politicians and who it is that's telling us what to think can have on us long term, and how many people it can really grab hold of. You know, i.e., it's like Canadians were conditioned for so long to think that a government that does absolutely nothing but speaks to you in a way that makes you feel virtuous, or speaks about what we're doing in a way that feels virtuous, even if there's no factual grounding for that virtue at all. In fact, if you take a look at jobs reports, if you take a look at economy reports, it's quite the opposite. They're saying all the right things and producing the worst results we've ever seen in some categories. So then when you have a leader who is saying all of the true things, it feels uncomfortable and you reject it, right? It feels angry. Oh, you're so negative and you're so angry. No, I'm being honest. There's a really big difference there. And honesty is really hard to hear when you have been gaslit and misled and manipulated for so long. And it's also humiliating to even acknowledge that you allowed that to happen to you. And that is really, I think, one of the biggest problems that we have. And it's a common thread in everything that we've talked about today. It is that this isn't about one politician or a pop star. This is just about Canada and Canadian people and how much confidence we have lost in ourselves from being conditioned and having our expectations lowered and having people think for us and having the information, the reality, the truth be so scary and so gut punching in some cases that it's hard to stomach. It's hard to even research on your own. Not to mention, it's also incredibly hard to admit that the party that was sold to you by the establishment, by the elites, by billions of dollars. They were sold to you with a lot of money behind them and a lot of power behind them as being your hero and your savior. It's really hard to admit that they wronged you and you let them and you believed them. And you've created your whole identity around the virtue that they sold you that it turns out isn't actually real. It was all theater. In 98% of cases, at least. I'm not saying that, over the last 10 years, there wasn't a single thing Liberals did right. There's definitely been a handful of wins. But when you take a look at the big picture of what our country has turned into, the wins seem abysmal compared to the losses. That is my rant for today. I will talk to you tomorrow. I'm Jasmine Lane. Like, share, subscribe, follow, and please comment your thoughts down below. Very curious to know what your take is, what your opinion is on the last little bit of what I was ranting about.